My name is Jack Keenan. I'm an executive managing director here at Cushman Wakefield. I've been in the commercial leasing business here in Chicago for about 25 years. I've been active with Cushman Wakefield for about the last 6 years, and I specialize in mostly office representation, tenant representation here in Chicago, primarily in the city, but also do some multi-market work.
Hi, my name is Jack DeRoche. I'm a director here at Cushman Wakefield in the Tenant Advisory Group. And in a prior life, I was actually an intern at the Chicago Board Options Exchange.
From a macro standpoint, the market has certainly changed. We had about a 7-year run up to 2020 where rates were slowly increasing here in Chicago. But things have slowed. They haven't slowed to a stop, but they certainly have slowed down. Our direct vacancy basically went from 13.8% to about 16.6% from early 2020 to the present. But the biggest change, obviously, has really centered around what people are doing, how they're working, and how the overall need, the real estate needs from a square footage standpoint, because companies just don't know at this point when their people are going to come back. And quite frankly, in certain industries, if they're fully going to come back. Employment has stayed strong, so companies are hiring. And traditionally what that means in our business is that people need a lot more real estate space. People talk about here in Chicago, businesses are all talking about sublease spaces, are companies giving up space. And the fact of the matter is they are, but probably not as quickly as you would think. 63% of the current sublease space in Chicago has been added since mid 2020. So that compares to, maybe an 82%, is about an 82% number in 82% in San Francisco and 79% in Boston. And a lot of that has to do with the diversity of business in Chicago. And that's something that Chicago really has going for it, in that some of these other gateway cities, their economies are not as diverse. The one great thing, there's a lot of great things about Chicago, but from Chicago, from a real estate standpoint, one of the things that really helps this market is we have an incredibly diverse, we are actually the most diverse economy out of the major gateway cities around the country. And that helps us. We're not solely dependent upon tech. We're not solely dependent upon financial services. So when there's trouble and when we have economic crisis in this country, there's a lot of different businesses in our market that can, we're the city of broad shoulders. There's a lot here. There's a lot to hold this market up. In terms of rate, and rates, office per square foot rates in downtown Chicago or in Chicago in general, they've certainly declined, but we have a slower rate decline here in Chicago, again, because of that diversity. So asking rents have softened and rent concessions have risen. Net effective returns, which is what landlords make at the end of the day after all concessions are added into a deal, have been dropping since early 2020 after a steady 7-year rise. But we don't fluctuate as much as other gateway cities. New York and San Francisco, Boston, these markets can see huge, like 25, 35% swings. Here in Chicago, we rarely see swings in any of our crises. And that includes the dot-com crisis, that includes the financial crisis. We rarely see them swing more than 15. And that's, again, because of the diverse market that we have here in Chicago. We're now in this Delta variant. So let's just say we've hit the pause button a little bit, but prior to that, we were actually up 156% in Chicago compared to early 2020, but still only 86% of where we were in terms of market tour activity compared to pre-pandemic levels. And interestingly, Chicago leads in the recovery percentage compared to every other gateway city, that being New York, DC, LA, San Francisco, and Boston. So our activity has picked up substantially, and more so than, we track all this stuff for all these markets. Obviously Cushman is a massive organization. We have offices all across the country and all across the world, certainly every major metropolitan city. So we actually track tour activity, and Chicago leads all the other gateway cities.
In terms of Chicago's recovery and the tailwinds and headwinds that are influencing here in the city, as Jack mentioned before, Chicago's economic diversity is a major tailwind that'll help benefit and stabilize the city. In addition, diverse talent pipeline that we have here, the diverse talent pipeline, the affordability of the city's connectivity to other major markets around the country and around the world, and the city and state infrastructure provide, a resilience to our city in times of economic weakness. In addition to that, companies want to be here and continue to want to be here. Chicago has actually been the #1 metro market for corporate expansion and relocation for the last 8 years running. In terms of headwinds, there is, around this Delta variant, there's going to be a stall in reoccupancy, and a lot of companies that we work with today and are talking with daily are going through, measures to understand how they're going to return. So we're going to continue to see a stall in that for the next several months, up to a year or more. In Chicago specifically, there is an oversupply or a potential for an oversupply that may be coming down the pike that can be attributed to new developments that are either planned or under construction at the moment, as well as a lower absorption rate just due to direct rates falling, et cetera. Lastly, and probably most impactfully, the work from home impact that we are seeing, and what we're seeing in that is a move to more of a hybrid workforce model. While that's expected to be less severe in Chicago compared to other markets, it's still forecasted to reduce office demand by up to 30% over the next few years.
There are a lot of different industries that continue to expand and take space in Chicago. Well, that being said, some of them are still working from home, but life sciences is growing very, very fast here in Chicago. Certainly the technology industry continues to grow. Look at law firms. I mean, across the board, we've seen law firms become very, very active in this pandemic and continue to take space and continue to grow. And I would say, it's not a lot of this that goes on in downtown Chicago, but in our market as a whole, manufacturing is absolutely, the industrial markets in and around Chicago are very, very tight. And it's that way across the country, but it certainly is that way here in Chicago too. Industrial space is extremely tight. So the fact of the matter is that Chicago has really remained a hotbed for startups as well as other major corporate headquarters. While people talk about the population decrease, the overall population may have been decreasing a little bit, but Cook County's population with a bachelor degree or higher has increased 3.5% since 2019. Startups have raised more than local companies did in all of 2019, and is on pace to break 2020's record high of 2.8 billion. So I would say that our leasing activity has picked up, and the demand patterns that we're seeing now reflect pre-pandemic patterns. Almost 2/3 of the leasing activity has been in the central business district, and only 1/3 has been in the suburbs, indicating that tenants are not fleeing and heading out to the suburbs.
In respect to financial services firms, I don't think that industry should be necessarily isolated from other office using industries. I think, from a macro standpoint, all industries, all types of companies across the board are continuing to look at their workplace and the future of their workplace differently today. So I think it is more of a case-by-case basis, and the types of workers that you have in each company and the types of jobs that they do. Most companies today have begun that process of implementing hybrid models, as we talked about before, in order to understand the effects that that might have on their recruiting, and also on their overall space requirements, not just the amount of space, but also how that space is actually laid out. Overall, again, in general, the goal of most companies that we're talking to is to design space and to design a workplace and workforce strategy that encourages productivity, collaboration, innovation, all the like. Obviously, we know that data centers are a critical component for a lot of companies, including financial services firms, tech firms, the like. Chicago, as a competitor in the world market, actually ranks second in the entire world as a data center market. Some of the factors that contribute to this ranking include the development pipeline specifically around the Elk Grove Village area and south part of Chicago, cheaper land prices, low vacancy rates, cloud availability, fiber connectivity, market size, incentives, and infrastructure redundancy all play a part in making Chicago such a hotbed for data center and the data center market.
In any market where there's stress, as tenant rep brokers, this is when our call to action, our call to arms, if you will. My advice and our advice to our clients has consistently been plan. We don't know when we're coming out of this pandemic. We don't know if it's going to be 3 months, 3 weeks, or 3 years. But the bottom line is companies in Chicago are still hiring, and some of them are hiring at a fast pace. And that means some of those people are working from home. Some of those people are working in the office. We go back to pre-pandemic levels and people go back to work. We're going to have a problem in this market, in that there's not going to be enough space. Right now, landlords are nervous. And what does that translate to? It translates to opportunity. So companies that are doing their planning now, figuring out what if we all come back? What if 50% of us come back? The companies that are figuring that out now are going to be the ones that are going to reap the benefits of landlords' concern. 5 years ago, we weren't talking to landlords about leases that expired 7, 8 years in advance. Today, we are, and landlords are listening. There are companies out there that have come to us and said, we've got a lease that expires in 8 years. We need to make some changes. We're willing to extend our lease a little bit beyond that. A landlord in today's market will talk to you about that. Bottom line is that there is still activity, strong activity in certain segments of this market. Newer buildings, trophy buildings that have just been built. The river corridor is extremely hot in Chicago. Buildings that are on the river. All the new developments have got, if they're not completely full, they're almost full. The redevelopments, buildings like the post office, are essentially full. If we go back to a pre-pandemic activity, work activity from going into the office, there's going to be a remarkable change in this marketplace, and it will happen quickly. And if you're not ready for that, if you haven't done your planning, you're in trouble. So our advice to our clients and people we're talking to on our daily basis is, let us come in and help you plan for what may come around the corner. Because when it does, you're not prepared, you're going to miss that opportunity.